It is so indefensible, the imagery itself. I wrote a column that appeared this morning, and I described it as undeniably racist.
Donald Trump said he didn't see the part of the social media video which showed a racist clip depicting Barack and Michelle Obama as apes. For about 1 second at the end of a 62-second video containing claims about voter fraud, unsubstantiated claims by voter fraud in 2020 presidential election, the Obamas are shown as apes in a jungle while music from The Lion King is playing in the background. Now, the video was first defended by Caroline Leavitt, but then it was later removed. Here's the US president speaking to reporters on Friday.
I looked at the first part, and it was really about voter fraud and the machines, how crooked it is, how disgusting it is. Then I gave it to the people. Generally, they look at the whole thing, but I guess somebody didn't, and they posted, and we took it down, and we did it. But that was a voter fraud that nobody talks about. They don't like to talk about that post. We took it down as soon as we found out about it.
Mr. President, a number of Republicans are calling on you to apologize for that post. Is that something you're going to do?
No, I didn't make a mistake. I mean, I look at a lot of thousands of things, and I looked at the beginning of it. It was fine. They had that one post, and I guess it was a takeoff. By the way, a lot of people covered. If you look at where it came from, I guess it was a takeoff on The Lion King. And certainly it was a very strong post in terms of voter fraud.
Well, that's what the president had to say on board his aircraft, as you heard there, quite obviously. Niall Stanage is the White House columnist at The Hill and joins us now. Niall, good afternoon.
Good to be with you, Alexis.
How much of a controversy has this video caused in the US? I mean, a lot of people were upset. We heard Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, initially defend its pose and rejected claims of racism, said that this was sort of concocted rage, if you like. What changed?
I think that was an incorrect assessment. I think there was enormous, genuine anger about this because it is so indefensible, the imagery itself. I wrote a column that appeared this morning, and I described it as undeniably racist. I mean, the depiction of black people as apes or monkeys is perhaps the most notorious, one of the most egregious tropes that of racism, of just outright racism. So there was enormous anger. It became a massive, massive story. And I think it is, in fact, testament to how big a story it became that the relevant post was taken down in the end. That's very rare for Trump on social media or anywhere else to delete something because of public outrage. I think that speaks to how broad the outrage was.
Tim Scott, the only African-American Republican senator, said the video was the most racist thing he's seen come out of the White House. Has he been critical of Donald Trump before?
Occasionally he has, but he's regarded as somebody who is broadly supportive of Trump. And in fact, Trump has spoken up on Scott's behalf in a number of times. So he's not like, for example, those one or two Republican senators, Tom Tillis from North Carolina, who's retiring, or Susan Collins, a moderate from Maine, who are the voices that people typically look to for Republican senators critical of Trump. Tim Scott isn't in that category. And so I think his criticism did, understandably, get quite a lot of traction.
In regards to the other big story, of course, the release of yet more papers, the Epstein files. The coverage here in the UK, as I'm sure you know, Niall, is focused very much on Peter Mandelson, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. What has been the reaction to the release of that latest tranche in the US? What have been the highlights? What have people been concentrating on?
Naturally enough, perhaps, American coverage has tended to focus on American figures.
Yeah.
Now, in relation to President Trump himself, there were some very lurid but very uncorroborated allegations in part as part of this release. And for quite understandable legal and ethical reasons, the mainstream media has not gone into those because of the lack of corroboration. There have, I think, been other figures in American life who, again, are not don't stand accused of any criminal wrongdoing, but who the latest release of files. It calls into question previous accounts they have given. So, for example, Elon Musk had said that he had refused to go to Epstein's island, whereas we see, in fact, emails from Musk saying that, asking when the wildest parties were going to be. We don't know for sure that he went, but the emails call his previous account into question. Same thing with Howard Lutnick, the US Commerce Secretary, who had said that he had cut off contact with Epstein at a certain point. That again seems at best dubious in light of the most recent releases.
I just want to spend a moment before we go, Niall, on Trump and how he's doing with his ratings. Look, it's not a surprise that his ratings are negative approval. I'm just looking here at the Silver Bulletin, which is sort of an amalgamation of a whole load of polls. He stands at minus 13.6%. But that hasn't really bothered Trump that much. He spent most of his first term in negative net approval. He managed to get re-elected. So I know that it's not something that weighs on Trump's mind that much. But on specific issues, though, like the economy and inflation, again, his ratings are quite low. How is this influencing the White House at the moment?
Well, I think the White House is eager to get those poll ratings up. And the reason they're eager to get them up isn't just to massage Trump's ego. It's because Republicans in the House of Representatives, specifically, Alexis, are defending an extremely narrow majority in November. There's a historic pattern where the president's party tends to lose seats in midterm elections, broadly speaking, and you couple that with the ratings that you have just cited, and you would have to say Democrats are pretty strong favourites to win at least the House. Senate is a different story, but at least the House in November. If that happens, Democrats get subpoena power, they can call hearings, they can demand testimony, and they can realistically begin impeachment proceedings. Of course, they can also stall any further legislative efforts by President Trump unless they happen to support them, which seems an unlikely scenario. So a lot depends on these midterms, and I think that is the element of this that is playing most on the White House's mind.
And just finally, Niall, we also heard from the president that he would have liked to have seen elections nationalised. Now, from what I understand, that would be hugely unconstitutional. The way elections work in the US is every state is responsible for their own elections. Caroline Levitt tried to say, well, he was actually only joking. But what do you read into Donald Trump's comments? I mean, the video that we started talking about, of course, was all about, again, he doesn't want to let go of this idea that the election was somehow stolen in 2020 with no evidence to suggest that it was. But what do you make of his comments, particularly of this sort of idea of nationalising the elections?
Well, I think you're absolutely right to connect these comments to his continued and fictitious claims that the 2020 election was stolen from him. And of course, the events that stemmed from that argument that he made, specifically the Capitol riot of January the 6th. So I think that's what concerns many, many Americans when they hear these comments about nationalizing elections. And specifically in that interview, he talked about Republicans should take over the voting. Now, aides to Trump have argued that he's actually talking about a much more modest idea, voter ID requirements, for example, that he wants to make elections more secure in that respect. But to people who are aware of Donald Trump's history, specifically as it relates to 2020, and then look ahead to the potential consequences for him if he loses the midterms, these kind of comments cause real alarm, real fear. In fact, if anything, I think the level of fear here in the US about that is perhaps underplayed a little in international media.
Niall, thank you for giving us your time. Good to speak. Niall Stanage, there, White House columnist at The Hill.